You may have noticed that you are muted and your camera is deactivated by default. No AI bots, please. There is a special function that is recently implemented in Microsoft Teams, which is a Q&A function, which you can see highlighted here. I've actually asked a test question in this Q&A tab, so you can make sure that it works for you. There is a button that looks like an upward pointing arrow, which enables you to upvote a question if this is a question that you might yourself have. The idea being that we will then answer questions in order of priority. So the most upvoted questions will get answered first. So that's what I've just said. If a question is unclear or we need more information, we do have the possibility to unmute individual participants to ask for more details on the question. And last but certainly not least, we expect all the participants to follow ESO's code of conduct. This presentation, as you can see, there has some links included. This is because it will be posted, so it'll, as a PDF format, you'll be able to click on the links to access relevant information there. So Nando already mentioned why we introduced the fast track channel. Since we moved to a yearly cycle, waiting a year before submitting observing proposals is not ideal. So it has to be balanced with the introduction of a faster turnaround channel. And this was a recommendation of the time allocation working group. What I've just said. And the idea, and this is quite a fundamental point, the fast track channel is intended to enable faster access than would be provided by the yearly cycle to new and timely scientific ideas. So it is not meant to be an alternative route for proposals that have been rejected during the previous regular cycle. That's the point that I will emphasize throughout the presentation. Last but not least, we at OPO, so the Observing Programs Office, we're always there to provide more individualized help. So please don't hesitate to contact us. The best way to do that is via the ESO Operations Help Desk. We still get occasional emails sent to opo@eso.org. This is not the ideal way to reach out to us. Really, the Operations Help Desk operates on a ticketing system, which makes it a lot easier for us and a lot more efficient for you as a user to get a timely response. So what proposal would qualify for this fast track channel? I'd like to first remember that the call for proposals, so in this case for period 117, remains the reference document. It's the binding document for the science policies, and it contains all the information in terms of the offered modes and instruments. There are, however, additional criteria specific for this fast track channel or FTC call. And the first one of those is that only VLT or VLTI normal programs with a maximum time request of 30 hours can be submitted to the FTC. So for instance, there is no time awarded on LACIDIA, no more monitoring, calibration, or large programs can be submitted through this channel. Another important point is that observations are carried out in service mode only. There is a possibility to convert some of this service mode time to designated visitor mode, but this would be done for operational reasons. As a user, you would only be able to apply for service mode observation. And about this point, this also means that visitor instruments are not supported through the FTC. GTO programs will not be offered. That will generally be the case through this fast track channel, unless there are new modes that are being deployed that would then be offered to the community alongside to the GTO consortia. For this first FTC call, there are no GTO programs that are offered. Target of opportunity modes, so rapid response mode, TOO hard and soft, will be offered as for normal programs. The reserve time for this first FTC call amounts to roughly 90 hours per UT, per unit telescope. That's a total of 350 hours for the VLT, 40 hours for the VLTI UT, and 70 hours for the VLTI AT mode. There are no scientific constraints to submit a proposal to the FTC. This is not, the F in FTC stands for fast. It does not need to be necessarily time critical observations. This is not designated for transient astronomy. So that just to make that clear. So all scientific objectives can be fulfilled through this channel. Again, I'd like to re-emphasize that you, as a user, you're not allowed to resubmit a proposal that was rejected in the previous yearly cycle. So that's an important point. I will come back to that and provide more information of what we consider to be a resubmission. Further restrictions may be imposed in terms of instrument right ascension ranges, observing conditions, depending on the status of the execution queues. I'll provide more information on that in the following slides. And last but not least, the FTC proposals will be evaluated using the same distributed peer review system that is used for actually most of the proposals submitted to the yearly cycle. So this is this DPR scheme, which if you've submitted a proposal as a PI, you're already familiar with, and the same will be applied to the FTC proposal. So each person submitting an FTC proposal will be required to evaluate 10 other proposals submitted to the FTC. In terms of available time by telescope, noted this was on the order of 90 hours per UT. Here you have the breakdown according to the different UTs and the VLTI in both UT and AT mode. So this corresponds to 15% of the science time between September and 1st and April 30th. So that's the end of period 117. And half of this time was allocated to this first FTC call. There, depending on the outcome, if it is successful in terms of community response, we are of course planning on having a second FTC called during period 117. Provide again more detail in the timeline later on. So this is probably one of the key information which made you join this town hall meeting in the first place. So I'll present the tentative timeline for this first FTC call, 117A, and the most important information is the date for the release of this call, which will be exactly 1 week from today, so May 27th, that's next Wednesday, and the call will remain open for approximately 3 weeks. I'll give you the complete timeline right now. This means that so approximately 3 weeks is actually 19 days in this timeline. So the proposal submission deadline would be Monday, June 15th. There would be 3 weeks for proposal reviewing. That would deadline on July the 6th. The results of the evaluation would be provided then late July. Then the phase 2 submission would be mid-late August. And the reason why this timeline is set up this way is that we are planning to have the observation period start on September 1st, possibly earlier if the scheduling, the phase 2 material is ready before then. But that is our target, to have the observations starting September 1st. And the observing period duration will be 6 months. So those will be for observations to be carried between September 1st this year and February 28th, 2027. So I noted that as a user, you would not be able to resubmit a proposal rejected in the previous call. What constitutes, in our view, a resubmission? Just start noting that this was actually mentioned in the call for proposals for period 117. There's a small statement about the actually a paragraph about the fast track channel, where this is actually clearly spelled out. So if you're planning on submitting a proposal to period FTC 117A, this cannot be a proposal that was rejected during the regular P117 call. And so a resubmission is a proposal where the primary science goals, hypotheses, or intended scientific outcomes are substantially the same of those of a previously submitted proposal, by the same or substantially overlapping team. And this is regardless of changes in targets, observing setup, or wording. Again, I'll provide a bit more detail on this. These resubmission criteria apply to proposals from the same PI or substantially overlapping teams and are not limited to identical author lists. So examples of clear resubmission cases is basically reuse of the same proposal with only lightly edited science justification. If it's a proposal that addresses the same science case, but with slightly modified target lists or observing strategy or slightly different instrument configuration, that would also be considered to be a resubmission. Again, with cosmetic or incremental changes. If you try to split a previously rejected programs into smaller proposals without changing the science goal. And so the key question to ask yourself as a user is the main scientific question different, and are the expected results or impact meaningfully different? And if the answer is no or not really, then it would probably likely be considered a resubmission. There are examples of likely acceptable cases of resubmitted proposals again, proposals addressing clearly different scientific questions, even if the same broad research area remains the same. If there are new ideas that are motivated by new theoretical developments, new data, or recent discoveries since the previous proposal submission deadline. If the concepts have actually been substantially revised, so where the original hypothesis is replaced or fundamentally altered, and again, if the expected scientific outcome is different, and projects that built on earlier work but pursue a distinct objective, not just simple completion or repetition. Again, last, in ambiguous cases, because I realize some of these criteria are not all clear cut. In ambiguous cases, the observatory reserves the right to determine whether a proposal constitutes a resubmission based on the scientific context. And we will, of course, look into this with great attention and in great detail. So what does this mean for you? When you submit a proposal, this is the usual phase 1 proposal form. It has a section which is similar to what it is in the regular cycle, which is a remarks and justification section. There is a new section in there called FTC justification, which is a mandatory but free text field. And in this section, so this section is made to justify why you are applying through this channel. It will be non-anonymized, so that means it will not be distributed to the reviewers. It's used exclusively for internal purposes within ESO to evaluate the fast track channel. So it's only for internal purposes. But we'd like to understand why it was not possible to submit the proposal during the most recent regular call, and why the proposed observations cannot be deferred to the next regular call. So this is the FTC justification field where this information should be spelled out. And again, it will not be distributed to the reviewers. So if a similar proposal was submitted by the same team in the previous regular call, then applicants should also briefly describe how the present submission differs from that earlier proposal. So that's directly addressing these resubmission criteria. If you think that it might be a borderline cases, but you would still like to apply to the FTC, you will need to justify why, in your view, the proposal does not constitute a resubmission. So in terms of the phase 1 proposal preparation tool, it's the same as it works in the same way as it would during the regular cycle. You click on a create new proposal button. You would enter a proposal title, select the cycle, which in this case is called FTC 117A, and the program type is the only one you can select, which is a normal. And then you create the proposal in exactly the same way as you would during the normal cycle. Again, they will be reviewed via a distributed peer review using the same rules and guidelines as in the regular yearly cycle. Now, this is important. The grade distribution of the FTC proposals will be normalized to the overall panel's grade distribution of the associated yearly cycle. And this is what is done also for the proposals reviewed via DPR during the regular call. They are normalized to the overall panel's grade distribution in the yearly cycle. So this is no different. And the time reserved for the fast track channel will be filled using the proposal ranking provided by the FTC review. I'd like to point out this the 10% fraction of Chilean time allocation is computed on the full allocation per period, so on a yearly basis and not per single FTC call. The same cutoff grades attained for the regular cycle are applied to the FTC on a telescope per telescope basis. So what this means is that proposals that are below the grade cutoff of the regular yearly cycle programs at the given telescope will not be scheduled. Poorly graded FTC proposals requiring poor observing conditions can be allocated as fillers in the C-rank queue to the discretion of the observatory. This is similar to what's done to C-rank proposals in the regular cycle. And this is important here. So FTC runs that are inserted in the scheduling queues will have a priority which pertains to their rank. What that means is that they're treated no differently from proposals that were approved during the regular yearly cycle. It's really just the normalized grade which will determine their position in the priority queue. If, and this of course we do not wish this to be the case, but if an FTC call goes undersubscribed, so there are even enough well-ranked proposals to fill the allocated the time that was set aside for the FTC call, then part of the time originally reserved for the FTC will be filled with the highest ranked non-allocated runs of the associated regular yearly cycle. So in terms of offered instruments and restrictions, so I mentioned this already, only service mode observations. This means that visitor instruments, you will not be able to apply for visitor instruments. So it's only service mode observations on the VLT and VLTI. GTO programs will not be offered, as I already stated. Espresso will be offered in one UT mode only. This is related to this first point about not allowing for visitor mode observations, because the 4 UT mode of Espresso is only available in visitor mode. So that will not be offered, only the 1 UT mode. There are no RA restrictions envisaged for this first FTC call. And now the following set of restrictions apply only to the VLTI. So the VLTI UT, there is simply no available time left for a turbulence category of 30% or better. So what this means is that it is still possible to apply for VLT UT time, but which require more relaxed constraints. So with turbulence category of 50% or worse. There is a revised limiting magnitude, which I'd like to report here. For the laser guide star VIS mode on Gravity and Matisse, which has moved from 17 G of 17 to 15.5, but this mode is available. So the observatory, as far as scheduling expects to keep the same distribution of VLTI and only minor adjustments to the VLTI 80 if needed by the top-ranked FTC proposals. And applicants can check the distribution of baseline configurations scheduled during P117 in the observatory schedule, and there's a link to that, but I'll pop it up for you to see. This is showing the schedule from September 1st, 2026 to the end of the observing period for this first FTC call, so February 28th, 2027, and you already can see for the VLTI UT and the VLTI AT what are the scheduled runs for both of these configurations. Okay, in terms of run validity and carryover for the FTC 117A call, so I mentioned this, the observations will start on September 1st, slightly earlier if this is possible, but this is our targeted starting date, and the observing period will extend for 6 months. So non-completed A-rank FTC runs will be carried over until the end of period 117, in this case until April 30th, 2027. So that will be extended for a further 2 months. B-rank FTC runs, however, will be terminated at the end of the FTC validity range. So that means late February 2027. And FTC runs allocated in designated visitor mode will not be compensated for possible weather losses. In terms of outlook, and this is nearing the end, The future FTC time fraction is currently 15% of the total available science time, and the maximum time request, which per proposal, which is currently set to 30 hours, will be tuned based on the outcome of this first FTC 117A call. And the idea is to keep the oversubscription similar to that of the regular yearly cycle. So we'll have to see after the fact, we'll run our analysis and see if these numbers need to be tuned somewhat. I mentioned a second FTC call will be considered based on the community response to FTC 117A, and we expect the response, we expect you to submit a lot of proposals to this first FTC call, so we do expect to have a second one during P117. And the plan is to reduce this duty cycle, which is basically the time from the submission deadline to the start of the first observations. So remember the submission deadline for this first call is mid-July, and the observations will start in September 1st, so we're slightly under 3 months. But the idea is to push this further down. So we'll see how this goes for the second FTC call of period 117. So that's it from me. We can now move to the Q&A session. So I'll stop sharing my presentation so I can actually access the Q&A tab. Okay, so let me see. I will sort the Q&A in terms of most upvoted. Okay. So we have first a question. So will unsuccessful proposals in the FTC be blocked from the, there are new updates, be blocked from the yearly call? So proposal rejected in the FTC. So I'll actually defer that one to Nando.
Yes, so if a proposal is rejected during the FTC, you can apply for the yearly call. What we are still considering, if we will offer FTC-B, whether a proposal rejected at FTC-A will be acceptable, say, for FTC-B. This we have not seen, but we will ask the question when we decide whether we issue a second call. But for FTC rejected proposals, yes, you can resubmit them to the yearly cycle, which we consider as a completely new round in the proposal evaluation.
Thank you, Nando. So there's another question, is will accepted but unobserved proposals be eligible for the FTC? So indeed, I mean, the resubmission criteria applies to rejected proposals. So if the proposal was accepted, then indeed they would be eligible for the fast track channel. So I don't know if Nando, feel free to complete.
Yes, I confirm that. Yes, indeed.
So I'm reading a question. Is it allowed to submit proposals that are time critical, but for which the required time window is not yet certainly known by June 15th? For instance, in a coordinated observation with another observatory. I mean, this is a similar situation that happens during even the regular yearly cycle. So yes, absolutely. I mean, it's people do submit proposals with the idea that they are applying for time in multiple facilities, which each have their own agenda and own proposal submission timelines. So yes, it is possible to apply for such. So time critical, I'm assuming this would be target of opportunity observations. It is possible then to apply for this in advance without having the outcome of time that is asked at other facilities. That was a question asked by Jens. I can't see the full name, sorry. We have a question about the Chilean time. How will the Chilean time be considered? Well, as I said, so the 10% of Chilean time is evaluated taking into account the full observing period. Nando, I don't know if you want to complete the reply from a more policy.
Yes, that is correct. Given the fact that the FTC, we're talking about small numbers, so to speak, and it is the same, and at other telescope we complete. So in general, we compute the fraction to be reported to Council and to the ESO Chile committee overall, using the overall allocation of the period. So what we will do is that at the end of the period 117, we'll make sure that we get this fraction. Of course, in the scheduling process, then the scheduling team will take this into account, but we do not guarantee that in any single FTC the 10% limit will be reached. What we will aim to is to reach the 10% overall across the yearly cycle.
Thank you, Nando. We have a question about a second call. So assuming a second call happens, roughly when is this foreseen? Is this a deadline 6 months later? So this hasn't been set in stone, but the idea is for a deadline to, that there will be some slight overlap in time between the two FTC calls. So that means we will not wait the end of the observing period validity for FTC 117A before starting FTC 117B. And the idea is for the second FTC call to cover the last 4 months of period 117. But this again has not been set in stone, so we will, of course, announce this to the broadcast this to the community when this is when the final data set. But certainly we will not wait 6 months to open the second FTC call. There's a question about La Silla time. Will this be offered in future FTCs? I'll let Nando reply to this one.
For the moment, the plan is no. As you know, La Silla is fully allocated in visitor mode, which means that when the yearly cycle schedule is released, the schedule is fully filled, so there is no space to insert anything. There are only very slight exceptions, which are DDTs, and we are talking about a few hours, and they are very rare in La Silla. So the short answer is no, not at the moment.
Thank you. So there's a question about, is there any effect on DDT, or is that channel always still available? Yes, absolutely. The DDT channel is it has a duty cycle in this case that can be as low as a day. So it is meant for your very time critical observation of that channel, that DDT. So director's discretionary time will remain activated, and there will be no modification. So time will not be taken away from the DDT channel to deploy this fast track channel, if that is the underlying question. So no worries there. We have a question about the oversubscription. I'll let Nando reply that if that's okay. How will the oversubscription of FTC be balanced with the regular call when the oversubscription varies so much by instrument and by UT?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and I don't think I have a very reasonable answer to this. So we'll have to see. I mean, this is a learning process. It's the first time we do. You have to understand that this is much larger than the DDT, for which we allocate of the other 1% of the time, which is already larger than the fast turnaround of Gemini in itself. So offering 15% of the time is an exercise that nobody has done, and so we are not entirely sure what will happen. It will depend on your reaction, how many of them we will get. And so based on what we get from the first round, we will see what to do. So at the moment, I don't have a firm answer to this question.
Thanks, Nando. There's a question about, is there a minimum maximum limit in the size, number of hours for a proposal? Yes, it is 30 hours. That's the cap. So the maximum amount of time you can ask for per proposal in this first FTC call, and that number may change in the future, but for this first FTC call, it's limited to 30 hours. Are the guidelines for member versus non-member states similar to the regular call? They are not only similar, they are identical, and this is spelled out in the call for proposals for the regular yearly cycle. That remains the reference document in terms of policies and guidelines pertaining to this matter. Let me see. Okay, so is my understanding correct that if there is a second call, there will be 60 hours available in period 117 for the FTC, so 30 hours for FTCA plus 30 hours for FTCB equals 60 hours total. So I think there's maybe a confusion. This is the 30 hours is the maximum time that one can request in terms of observing time per proposal, but the total time reserved for the FTC, showed the numbers, so is 350 hours of VLT time, and I forgot the numbers for the VLTI, but it's significantly larger, and it's expected to be the same allocated time for this second FTC call. So we just looked at 50% of the available time started from September 1st through the end of period 117, so April 30th, and allocated half of that for this first FTC call.
So including, if you count the two FTCs together, if we will release a second call, we're talking about 700 hours of VLT time. So it's not a small amount of time.
Thanks, Nando. Okay, so if it so there's a quote, if it cannot be deferred to the next call. So I think this is referring to this FTC justification field. So it should be urgent, but not as urgent as DDT. Will the FTC justification box be evaluated by ESO for all proposals before they go to DPR? So that second part of the question, no. Again, the FTC justification will actually not be reviewed, and it will be evaluated. The timescale, for the internal ESO evaluation will be significantly longer, so that will occur, maybe even after the fact. In terms of the urgency, so the fast and fast track channel is really for the turnaround time. So between proposal submission deadline and the start of the observation. So they don't necessarily need to be urgent observation. If your observations qualify as urgent, then probably the most natural channel is through the DDT, so the director's discretionary time. So there's no sense of urgency or time criticality. This is not reserved for time domain science. But there are situations where, let's say, you came up with a new idea, and the proposal deadline just passed, and you would like to try out this idea and not wait another year before you want to implement this new idea. So this type of scenario would fully qualify for the FTC in this case. So this is why we stress the fact that there are no scientific constraints for applying to the FTC, so it does not necessarily need to be time critical in terms of the science. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. While you prepare for the next question, I clarify another point which is related to the last one. We don't want to give the impression that the justification field is going to be used in the evaluation. No, that is not the case. As Stefan said, this is only for internal purposes, mostly for statistical reasons. We would like to understand why people use the FTC channel. Because when we discussed with the governing bodies the move to the yearly cycle, the governing bodies, and including also the users committee, said, yeah, but we need to introduce something to balance for the loss of reaction time, say, because it becomes much longer. And several reasons were put together. One is the one that Stefan described. The other is when new data became available after the last deadline and the topic is very hot. And so these, unless we do something, ESO and its community will lose the opportunity of exploiting this and leaving it to some other facility. So these are the two main cases, but we would really like to get and handle, say, a quantitative handle exactly on how the community is using this channel. I see that there is a question about the PhD. That is another point that was brought up, especially by the users committee. If I have a PhD project that cannot wait for a year, that is, and we would like to understand how many of these proposals are, say, based on this need from the community.
Thank you. Question about will the already approved programs have priority and protection over the FTC? How will a competing FTC that is proposed be compared with already existing proposals that are accepted? So I see Nando nodding. I'll let you reply to that one if that's okay.
Yeah, so this will be treated exactly in the same way as we treat now the conflicts with already approved programs, like large programs or monitoring programs which are already in the system. If a scientific conflict is identified, the priority is given to the proposals that were approved first. So if the science is a duplicate of an approved and running program, that most likely will be rejected. Is this using the same procedure that we use within the same cycle. If you have a higher priority proposal and a slightly lower priority proposal that plan to do the same, the lower priority is rejected based on the conflict. And this, of course, is evaluated on a one-to-one cases. So we really need to see the case. If you are in doubt, of course, well, you should submit a proposal and leave this to Stefan, myself, and Annalisa then to analyze the possible scientific conflict.
Okay, we have a question regarding the evaluation. So if ESO isn't evaluating the FTC justification box first and everything goes to the DPR, how is the rejection of duplicate proposal handled? Is ESO doing this before or after the DPR? Question to that is it's going to be done in parallel, and in the same way we evaluate, for instance, violations of the anonymization guidelines or scientific conflicts. The idea being that we do expect, the user community broadly to follow these guidelines and not try to, resubmit rejected proposals through this channel. And, unfortunately, if we want to keep this duty cycle below 3 months, then this process needs to occur in parallel to the distributed peer review. So it could be in the same way that in the DPR, a proposal is evaluated, but then is identified by one of us at the Observing Programs Office of having a serious anonymization violation and is later rejected. That would mean the proposal has been evaluated, but is rejected at a later stage. So this will be the similar case here for the evaluation of the resubmission criteria. It would just take too long if we were to delay the reviewing of the proposal once that evaluation step is done by us in OPER. Will there be a right of appeal if ESO rejects our justification for using FTC? So I'd like to clarify, I mean, this information is not meant to trick the proposer or the user in any way. It really is used for our internal purposes. So we won't base a rejection on this FTC justification field. This will be based on a more complex and detailed evaluation of comparing a proposal to all the proposals that were rejected in the previous year regular cycle. In terms of a right of appeal, I mean, this is the decision is final as far as I understand. I mean, Nando can maybe complete that. I don't think there's a right of appeal if that is even envisaged in the regular cycle. So I don't know if Nando, if you want to comment on that.
No, so we would not change the procedures as it is now in case of misunderstandings or not satisfaction about the outcome of the proposal selection process. Then every PI has the right to write to us, and then we would address that either internally or with the reviewers if that is the case. But since this refers mostly to the qualification for a resubmission or not, this will probably be in our own hands. So we are ready to discuss. Look, we are not the police. I mean, we are trying to facilitate the process. Definitely what we want to avoid is that, as Stefan said at the very beginning, FTC does not become a backdoor to just resubmit the same proposal n times until it goes through. This is definitely something we want to avoid. The request by the governing bodies to introduce the fast track was to allow ESO not to lose opportunity for new important science cases, not to take advantage of the fact that the calls are now more frequent, actually were in the semester-based process that we had for the last 60 years.
Thank you. So I see people now actively upvoting questions, so I can now take them in order of priority. So there's one about, would a similar proposal be eligible for resubmission if it is important for completing the PhD, given that future calls would fall beyond the remaining PhD timeline? I know this is, and there are a couple of hearts there associated with that. I know this is a kind of a heartbreaker, but disclosing information about the career stage of the proposer or a member of the proposing team is actually, a violation of one of our anonymization guidelines. So, unfortunately, even in the evaluation of proposals in the regular cycle, this is not an argument that is taken into account by the reviewers. And if this is information that is explicitly noted, then we do just issue a small warning to the proposer that such information should not be disclosed, so the career stage. And I understand this is that sometimes you want to obtain data on a timescale which is compatible with the completion of a PhD thesis. But unfortunately, this is not taken into account in the evaluation. Okay, second most upvoted. So would you list the benefits of these new rules for the ESO community when some US facilities are accessible on a far more flexible and frequent timescale? Nando, I'll hand
Yes.
hot potato over to you.
Yes. First of all, okay, most of the US facilities call on a yearly basis and do not have any mid-cycle. I like to name, JWC is one of them, but many, many others. Keck, Gemini has the fast turnaround, but as we said, yeah, they may be more flexible, but fast turnaround covers, it's open every month. Most of the calls go undersubscribed or even closed, and anyway, we're talking about a time that is smaller than our own DDT. Then the HST had mid-cycles, which were quite successful at the beginning, but then to the extent that you also had 2 calls, they were pretty restrictive in terms of more restrictive than ours. Originally, we wanted to copy the same system, but the governing bodies did oppose to that. This is why Stefan correctly said that there are no restrictions in terms of scientific cases, while at HST there were. However, the truth is that HST after a while discontinued that channel recently because it went undersubscribed. It was no use anymore. So I would be curious to know what exactly means that some US facilities, to know which ones they are and to which scale they operate, and on a far more flexible and frequent time scale, which I doubt that is really the case. Now, with the fast track, I mean, there are no restrictions basically. We just want to avoid, the only restriction is this resubmission of rejected programs. I mean, this is the real restriction, which we think it is fair because we don't want our system to be used as a lottery.
Okay, I'd just like to mention that if you have want to add a comment to the question that you asked, you can use there's a field below the question box if you want to add an additional comment. We will review this Q&A tab after the fact and include this in the frequently asked questions on our webpage, or provide a separate document where the answers to all the questions are summarized. So let's go to the next one. So if I submit a proposal during the regular cycle on, say, exoplanet imaging, does that effectively preclude me from being a co-author on similar proposals for FTC? There are certain technique-centered fields, I think, where the general science question would be similar between programs and proposals, even if targets and observing modes are different. Again, I mean, I don't think I can provide a generic answer to this. It really is focusing on, really if the science case is sufficiently different that if you were to show, the both proposals to reviewer that they would recognize this as 2 distinct science cases, regardless of the target lists and so on. It could be that observing the same target with different instrument setups for some science cases would constitute clearly distinct science cases addressing clearly different, meaningfully different scientific questions. But in other cases, it could be that it would just be replicating the same science case. So there's no, unfortunately, very clear answer I can provide to that. I think it's up to the proposer to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis. Again, we are available to assist you during the proposal submission phase. Actually, from now onwards, you can feel free to contact us through the ESO help desk, and we can provide this type of individualized assistance when needed. Let me update the. Okay, so I think there's about the evaluation. So if ESO isn't evaluating the FTC justification box first, then ESO scientists will likely spend time reviewing proposals that are non-eligible. We certainly hope that won't be the case. It might require 1 or 2 cycles before the community becomes familiar with the process. The same way, the first time the dual anonymized scheme was introduced, there was a few kind of rounds of people getting used to that. But again, the anonymization issues were evaluated also while the reviews were ongoing and after the fact. So we certainly hope this to be the case. We certainly don't want the reviewers to think that they're somehow wasting their time of reviewing proposals that could potentially be rejected at a later phase. And we will of course monitor that and make adjustments if needed for the second FTC call. But this is as new for you as it is for us. So we'll have to go through this first FTC call to see if indeed it is the case that there is a lot of reviewer power that is being devoted to proposals that are eventually rejected. We certainly hope that this will not be the case. We certainly hope that these clear resubmission cases will be a large minority of cases of submitted proposals. Okay, so there is a question. Let me sort it again. Okay, by most upvoted. So on the FAQ, okay, on the web page, so there is a section where it says you are expected to explain why it was not possible to submit your proposal during the last regular yearly cycle and why the proposed observations cannot be deferred to the next regular yearly cycle call. It is not easy, so this is now the user commenting, so it is not easy to justify why we need the FTC now and not waiting for the regular call, even in the case we obtain new data and the topic is hot. We can't just say we don't want to wait another year. That part is not clear to me. Well, actually, you can say we don't want to wait another year. I think that's also perfectly, if it is, again, quoting in your own words, if you have new data and the topic is hot, I think that's perfectly a valid justification for why you would want to apply to the fast track channel and not necessarily wait another year before obtaining the data and analyzing it. So I think this is a perfectly fine justification. Again, as Nando was mentioning, we're not there to this FTC justification field. A is non-anonymized. A will not be reviewed by the reviewer, and it really is meant to guide us internally within ESO to see, to evaluate the effectiveness of this fast track channel. So you shouldn't see this as an attempt for us to police the submission of proposals through this channel. So this justification, in my view, would be perfectly valid. There's a question. I'll leave this to Nando. Can rejected DDT proposals be submitted through the FTC?
Okay, this is an interesting question. Certainly the opposite doesn't work. I mean, we have an internal rule. If a proposal has been rejected via the regular channel, and in this case also through the FTC, and is submitted as a DDT, it is rejected upfront. We have a first check that tries to find whether there's a similar case, and then typically this is identified through the textual analysis, and in that case it's rejected. In this case here, I would say no. I think this is two distinct things, although, as Stefan said, the DDT serves typically a completely different purpose. You submit a DDT when you want a small amount of time and the observations to be executed typically in the next few weeks. And for FTC, this is not the case because, as you know, the first observation will be at least 3 months after you have submitted the proposal. So the two things, the two channels serve two different scientific purposes, and the reaction times are very different. So I would expect that this occurrence is very rare, but if it happens, I would not consider that as a resubmission. But just because the DDT is very special, so I expect this to be a very rare case. And you must have a very good reason why you resubmit a rejected DDT to the FTC, which may mean that your case is not so strong. But okay, that's a separate issue which would need to be addressed on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, the following question is, for small programs with 10 or less hours, should proposals be preferentially submitted through FTC, through the fast track channel, instead of the yearly call? No, absolutely not. There is a maximum time limit of 30 hours, but this doesn't mean, the idea of this fast track channel is really to enable users to apply for observing time in between consecutive yearly cycles. So it's not, it is limited to small programs, so less than 30 hours, but this does not mean this should be the privileged route for modest or small programs. Absolutely not. So it's it can be unless there's, if the proposed observations can wait the next yearly call and it's a small program, then that's when it should be submitted. If there's some reason why you would want to obtain the data before the next yearly call, then the FTC is absolutely justified.
In any case, on this I can add some statistical information in the regular cycle, so where you can submit a normal program up to 199 hours, so pretty big. The median time of 117 was 18 hours. So 30 hours for an FTC is already going to the, say, longer range of proposals during the regular cycle. And the reason why we have tentatively set this 30 hours as a limit, because this more or less coincides with what the transition level limit between DPR and panel review in the regular cycle. It's very tentative, but that is the rationale. So I mean, since it has to go through DPR, we wanted, say, not to be introducing some other systematic effect now by allowing much shorter proposals, for instance, only much shorter proposals in the FTC. So the game is very similar to the regular cycle, as a matter of fact, but most of the proposals have less than 30 hours.
So again, Nando, a question about the Chilean time. If the 10% Chilean time is computed over the complete yearly cycle, but has 15% of that time been reserved for the FTC? Or is it possible that by the time the FTC call is out, the 10% Chilean time has already been used up?
Well, this, we can always evaluate it retrospectively. And if in one period there was more allocation, say above 10% and maybe 15%, then in the next cycle, one can compensate for that. In any case, this is not a matter that should concern the people who apply for time. This is something that will happen, say, at a higher political level and post facto. You should not worry about, if you are a Chilean PI, you should not worry about that. I mean, this will be taken care of.
Thanks, Nando. There's a question about whether one PI can submit 2 proposals on 2 different science hypotheses as long as the total requested time is less than 30 hours. And I see that Bibiana Prinoth has already replied that it's 30 hours per proposal, and the answer is correct. So indeed, there is no limit on the number of proposals that one can submit. So the total time is not 30% across all proposals, but it's on a proposal per proposal basis. So thanks, Bibi, for providing the answer. I'll archive the question. Okay, we have for now 2 questions to go. Which would be the criterion for establishing whether a science case is different? For instance, changing the time requested for probatory kind proposal to exploratory proposal have 2 different scientific objectives, even though I'm just decreasing the time, keeping the same targets and instrument setups. Would this scenario be acceptable for the FTC? Nando, since you...
I would say no. I mean, this scaling, say, a full-fledged science case to a pilot program, but most likely the science question is the same on a smaller sample. Typically, you would do this because your proposal was rejected because whoever, either DPR or the panel studio, they first want to see a demonstration that this is feasible, but that should go again through the next yearly call. Otherwise, it would be a never-ending story. So then you will try and again. I would consider this a resubmission. As Stefan said, though, we will have to evaluate this on a case-by-case basis because there may be some subtle details which cannot be phrased in a general way with a general rule for everybody. There are always going to be some gray areas in this place.
And again, feel free to reach out to us for more individualized attention, and then we can provide this ahead of the proposal submission deadline if there are specific science case for which you would like more tailored. Okay, so we have one question. Can the idea or the hypothesis be based on the content of a paper on which we are currently working and that most likely will be submitted by June the 15th? Yes, absolutely. In any case, there's in the proposal has to follow the dual anonymous guidelines, so there you cannot explicitly refer to papers in preparation if that information is only available to you. So typically, papers with reference, in preparation or submitted, which are not visible on the archive, for instance, is a clear case of violation of the anonymization guidelines. But yeah, there is no, of course, I mean, it is possible to base a hypothesis on the content of a paper that will or will not be submitted by the proposal deadline, of course. Let me archive. So, is there a limit to the number of proposals to be reviewed by a PI if they submit more than 2 proposals, similar to the regular cycle? We will try to, ensure that this is the case, of course, and this happens, some occasions during the regular cycle. People who submit 3 or even more proposal as PI, we ask them to designate a delegated reviewer for the DPR process, so that they don't end up evaluating 30 or 40 proposals, because at face value it is 10 proposals to be reviewed per proposal submitted as PI, but there is the possibility to delegate this task to a co-I on the proposal, and so that's what we would reach out to people when this case presents itself. Nando, I don't know if you have extra.
No, that is correct. So we tend to discourage that you review more than 20 proposals, because then you enter the domain of the panels, and which is exactly what the DPR was supposed to cure. So we had a very few cases which we had a PI having to review 40 proposals, but we always got back to the person, and even post facto after the proposal submission deadline, asked them to indicate at that stage a delegated reviewer, so that we will bring the number at least down to 20. So we will apply the same process to the FTC as well.
Thanks. We have still one question in the queue. I'll try to read it in a way that, so how similar is too similar for science cases? Yes, it's a delicate question, but there's a clear example here. So if I put a main call proposal in aiming to study the thermal emission planet Y, looking for molecule X because of reason Z, can I propose to use the same technique for planet Y2, looking for molecule X because of reason Z2 in FTC? How different does Z and Z2 need to be? Because to some extent, exoplanets are closed systems. So on some level, you can argue a lot of science cases are related in some way. If it's unclear to the proposer whether the science case is clearly different, then it likely isn't that different. And in any case, you need to put yourself in a position where if it is a borderline case, you really need to convince it's not ESO. You really need to convince the viewer in a way that this is a different science case. So if we were to give the same, we will not. But if we were to show the same proposal submitted in the previous cycle and this new proposal to the same reviewer, would this be recognized as addressing the same science questions? So I understand that that meaningfully different results. This meaningfully adverb is somewhat vague. It is necessarily so by construction, and there will be individual cases where it will not be a clear-cut situation. But we are not there again to police. We will there to catch some very clearly identifiable cases of resubmission, and we hope and expect those actually to be a relatively small number. And in cases that are borderline to the point that we ourselves wouldn't be able to clearly judge, then we'll probably let those pass. I mean, that's my understanding. We're there. I mean, the idea is for people to keep using ESO's telescope and produce exciting science with them. We're not there to limit that in any way. And since the question was very specific, again, I invite the user to reach out to us. Okay, so that's how similar. There's another question that appeared in the meantime. It is still unclear to me at which level and by which panel it is decided which proposals are triaged because of resubmission roles. So there will be no evaluation through panels. So this is only all the proposals will be evaluated through the distributed peer review. And the decision whether a proposal is a resubmission or not will not be evaluated by the reviewer. This will be evaluated internally at ESO within the Observing Programs Office. So this is really separated from the reviewing process.
Yeah, if you wish, that is more of a policy matter than a scientific matter. Of course, we'll use our scientific judgment to decide whether a proposal is a resubmission or not. But as correctly Stefan said, we keep the two things separate. The reviewers are asked to evaluate the scientific merit. Yeah, it may be that some of those in the end will be rejected posteriori because they are judged to be as resubmissions, but this last call is by ESO. So the Observing Programs Office, in the person of myself, Stefan, and Annalisa and Francesca, will examine and possibly consult with other experts in case of borderline cases and take a decision. So all proposals will be reviewed scientifically, and then there's going to be a judgment, which is in the same process as we do, exactly in the same way we do with just the scientific conflicts or other compliance to our policies. We distribute all proposals, and because of the timeline, they need to be reviewed. They cannot wait for us to analyze all the cases before they do the review. This would be unfeasible, especially in the early call. In the FTC, this will very much depend on the number of proposals we will get. If we get 10 proposals, we may most likely take a decision before we distribute them. But if we get already 100 or more, then this will have to be run in parallel. And as Stefan said several times, this is a learning curve that we will, exercise and see. It may be that this number is so small, the number of, resubmissions, that, okay, it would be easy to identify them, and the overload, so the extra load on the reviewers is going to be negligible in the end. So it will be one less proposal to review out of 10. So it's negligible. We really hope that the resubmissions are not going to be the dominated component of the FTC, because if that is the case, then the whole thing will be rediscussed, because that is not the purpose the FTC is supposed to serve.
Thank you, Nando. So I see no further questions in the Q&A, and we've hit the 1 hour limit. So I would suggest that we close the meeting. We stop the recording. Again, the FTC call will be released 1 week from today. It will be announced via scientific newsletter on the same day. The webpage will be updated with the recording and slides of today's presentation included there. We will continue updating the frequently asked question section, and think about producing a separate document with the answers to the questions that were asked during this town hall meeting. And again, I've repeated this several times, but don't hesitate to reach out to us via the ESO ticketing or the ESO help desk for more specialized and individualized attention if anything was unclear. Thanks so much for joining today, and looking forward to a first successful fast track channel for ESO.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Stefan, and thanks everybody for attending. We reached a peak of almost 250 attendance, which is a very good number. So thanks a lot for your attention, and good luck with the proposal submission.